Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cedric Black podcast, where we dive into topics that impact our daily lives, namely noise pollution. I'm Cedric Black, and today's episode is all about understanding noise perception and tolerance, the way we tolerate noise. But before I go any further, I want to recap noise pollution and what noise pollution is for anyone that's listening for the first time. Try to incorporate this into most of the episodes just to give you an understanding of what noise is, or just the term, because a lot of us haven't heard the term noise pollution. You may not be familiar with the term itself. So noise pollution is unwanted sounds. That's the short way to explain noise pollution is unwanted sounds. Sounds that we can't control, and the sounds that disrupt us in some way. They cause some type of disruption or some type of irritation to us. That's what noise pollution is. And it's sounds that are created by people. Human created sounds that we have no control over. For just to give you a few examples of noise pollution: traffic, cars, trucks, how noisy they are, airplanes, construction sites, factories. Could also be people, crowds, anything that disrupts our peace in some way. That's noise pollution. See, I've always been that person who never really gave much thought to noise, because I grew up around noise. Like everyone, we grow up around it because it's our environment. That's what we hear in every direction that we turn. We grow up, it's noise, but we've just become so used to hearing it. I think I mentioned before that it's like a constant companion now. And then we have the left arm and the right arm. Now we have the noise. It's always with us. So one day I just started to wonder, what's the deal with all this noise? And could it be affecting more than just my peace and my quiet? I think that's where my deep dive into noise pollution started, by asking, what's the deal? And because it has to do something else other than disrupt my peace. And it does. So in today's episode, I'll be talking about the subjective nature of how we perceive noise. Like why some people why some people can sleep through a construction site while other people can barely stand the hum of a refrigerator. And trust me on this, it's more than just personal preference. Okay, but before we get started, I'm going to share just a quick story. The other day I was trying to enjoy a quiet evening at home, which is rare. I never get, even though I work from home, I'm in my studio all day, all evening, working. So I'm at home, but I'm working. I barely get quiet evenings at home. But this was just one of those times when I had 30 minutes to just do nothing. And I wanted to utilize that time. So when I was into my quiet time, my peaceful time, that little small time that I had, there was a thumping bass of a truck outside. It was music, and it was coming through my walls. Okay, and coming through the windows. You don't really hear bass. You feel bass. This was the type of bass that you feel. I wasn't close enough to where I could feel it in my chest, but it was almost there. because it was coming through the walls. The walls couldn't even contain it anymore. And there went my peace. There went my little quiet time, my little serenity. It was gone. Just in that split second, it was disrupted, and I couldn't get it back. And I started thinking after that, how could something like this, how could like a constant barrage of sound like that impact someone's mental health in some way? Because even though I was irritated in some way, it goes beyond that. It's beyond an irritation. So that's what we will be exploring today. That the effect that it has on our well-being and how we perceive these sounds and how we tolerate them. So the question I want to ask is, why does noise bug us in the first place? It's not about me being grumpy or grouchy, but there's some science behind it. Think about this. Let me give you something to think about. I want to set this up for you to think about. Give yourself a clean plate if you can, a clean slate. So, have you ever noticed how some people can sleep through a thunderstorm while other people can wake up at the slightest little sound? You always hear that, oh, this person is a heavy sleeper because they can sleep through anything. Or this person's, if you even move, or if you flick on the light switch or something, that person's going to wake up at the slightest little small sound. If you drop a pin, this person can wake up because they sleep light. And that's just not a random thing, though. It's all in our heads. Literally, it's all in our heads. Because our brains is where everything starts, is where everything happens. Okay? Our brains are wired to pay attention to certain sounds, especially the sounds that are unexpected, the sounds that just come out of nowhere. Way back in the day, now, it helped us to survive in some way because, being alert to potential dangers like a sneaky predator in some way, that helped us. It helped us to, that's a survival technique that we developed. So now when there's a sudden loud noise, our brains go like, our brains say, hey, hold up. Pay attention now. Something's up. Something's off. Now let's think about this a scenario that we've all experienced. And I'm talking about a restaurant scenario. If you're out having dinner or lunch at a restaurant or a cafe or something, I'm confident to say that this has happened to most of us. You're sitting down and you're eating dinner or whatever, lunch or something you're eating. One of the staff in the kitchen drops silverware, drops plate, dishes, they drop it on the floor. What happens to us? Our concentration is broken and our focus shifts. It has shifted to that noise for the split second because it's a sudden noise. That's a sudden sound. There's a sudden loud noise that makes our brain say, hey, something's off, something's different. If it happens on the left side, our left ear, what do? We turn our heads to the left. If we hear it on the right ear, we turn our heads to the right. So our brain is wired to follow the sound. It happens to all of us, I believe. Where the sound goes, so does our brain. Now that may be that was probably great for our ancestors who depended on sounds to help them survive. But in our world today, with all the constant buzz, beeps, the hums of traffic and construction and everything, it can get a little bit more overwhelming for our brains, for our minds. Now, don't get me wrong now, our brains are still wired to react strongly to these unexpected sounds. Even if it's just a car horn, car alarm, or a neighbor slamming the door, our brains are still wired to recognize that, hey, something just happened. What was that? Something's off. Now let's go back to the restaurant scenario. If there's music playing in the background, we don't notice it. We don't pay much attention. Unless it's a song that we know, we may sing along, but we don't hear it. But if it's that sudden noise, a sudden loud noise, if it's sudden, our brains say, hey, pay attention. But here's the thing. Our age and our personality play a role in this also. Because as we get older, we tend to become more sensitive to certain frequencies. That's why grandmama might cringe up at a sound of a loud motorcycle or a loud truck outside, but you may barely notice it. At some point in time, that truck that was outside of my house, the bass wouldn't have bothered me. I would have welcomed it, okay? I would have wanted more of it. I would have wanted to experience more of it. Now it bothers me. And some people may barely notice it, may not bother you. So it's not just about, okay, me being grumpy or fussy or having thin skin. There's a whole science behind why some noises affect us or bug us more than others. So why does it? Why does noise affect us the way that it does? It's not just about how loud or how soft it is. It's personal. For me, I believe it, yes, it's personal. Because if you think about, notice this, have you noticed how what music, let's talk about music since I mentioned music. I'm a music person. Let's think about what's music to someone's ears may be noise to another person's ears. So it's like this personal symphony that we carry around in our brains to trigger our ears that tell us what sounds good to us and what doesn't sound good. That could be a personal preference. It usually is. But that preference changes as we age. Because let's think about someone who listens to loud, heavy metal music and someone who listens to really soft, laid back, smooth jazz. You can almost picture the environments that you would play that type of music. Just visualize two concerts, a heavy metal concert and a jazz concert. You just visualize it. That person that listens to the heavy metal music, it probably energizes them, I'm guessing, in some way. And the person who listens to jazz relaxes them in a way. They want this, it's a wind down for them. It's not an energizing thing. So the person who likes the jazz music, if you, I'll say, isolate them in the room and only listen to heavy metal music, it may just drive them crazy. And the same for the person who listens to heavy metal music. Isolate them in a room where it's just smooth jazz, quiet jazz. Their brains are wired to accept a certain sound. If you stick them with jazz, they can't wait to get away from it. Why are you torturing me this way? I remember a movie. I think it was The Shawshank, I believe, when the warden would play this classical music, and this may not be the movie, but that's what I'm thinking. But the warden would play this classical music over the loudspeakers, and it just drove the inmates crazy. But over time, they accepted it because it was the same thing over and over again. I think they learned to tune it out. Think about the younger people that would be listening to that. They're used to a certain specific type of music. When they hear classical music and you're listening to it, especially if you're forced to listen to it, it's different if you have to choose it and you can choose to turn it off. But if you're forced to listen to it, how is that going to irritate you? How is it going to make you feel? That's the personal symphony that we carry around. As our age is connected to how we tolerate certain things. What I mean, our kids may be okay with the chaos of a playground. Okay, everything that's happening outside, they're loud, they're screaming, having fun, jumping around, running around, and it's noisy. But if you ask grandmama, she may want to find a quiet bench away from the playground and sit back and read her book for some peace and quiet. But it's not just age. Personality plays a big part in that also. Because some people thrive in like the hustle and bustle of city life, city living, while other people need that serenity to wind down, like the serenity that is provided by a countryside living. That's why some people live in the city, some people live in the country. City mouse, country mouse. So just remember this. It's not just the noise, it's about who's hearing it. For example, by nature, I'm an introvert. It's funny that I'm an introvert and I have a podcast that I'm hosting. But there's something that helps an introvert to change. So by nature, I'm an introvert. I like quiet spaces. I thrive off of quiet environments. But if I'm in a noisy environment, it has the opposite effect. Since we're talking about introverts, if you remember, I think around 2019-ish, when the pandemic first came, the COVID-19, the coronavirus pandemic came, when we were shut down, basically. Wasn't much happening. Businesses were shut down. Restaurants were almost non-existent. And schools were even shut down. They started Zooming for schools, having schools via Zoom online. And I remember Zoom shut down because they weren't prepared for the influx of traffic that it was getting from all the users all over the world. It was new to Zoom. It was new to students and the teachers. Teachers had a hard time adjusting because they weren't used to the technology. And parents were at home with the kids every day, all day, shut in. Everybody was shut in. It didn't bother me because I'm an introvert. My life is shut in every day. I'm working alone in my studio. I'm isolated. But I remember the movie from Will Smith. I think it's called I Am Legend. I think that's the movie when he was fighting the zombies and the town was deserted because they were afraid to come out at night. But when I took a drive one day, that's what I saw. I saw desertion in the city, in the town. Nobody was around during that time. Everyone was shut in. And I remember seeing a lot of social media posts from people that were extroverts, that were used to being out in the life, living their lives out in restaurants, clubs, bars, and everything else that they couldn't do. Now they were being forced to live in isolation, and it drove them crazy because they couldn't thrive. They couldn't be out in those environments where it was a bit more noisier and be energized. They were shut down in their houses. Now, some of them may argue and say, well, it's noisy in my house with all the kids here every day. There was no peace and quiet. But if you're an extrovert, you don't want the peace and quiet, you want the noise. But they were shut in and they couldn't go anywhere. Some people strive in those environments, and some of us strive on the quietness. Like me, I'm an introvert. I need the quietness. I would rather have it. I remember the other episode when I mentioned the restaurant experience that I had when it was so loud, I couldn't hear my wife speak. The conversation was just almost non-existent. It was so loud. I had to lean in to listen to her or ask her to repeat something, which became irritating to me because that just killed the entire environment. Let's go back for a minute. Let's back up for a minute and talk about jump back on our age, how it affects the way we hear things. Because as we get older, our ability to tolerate noise decreases. One reason is that hearing declines with age. So the noise can be more disruptive as we get older. Remember, at one point in time, that loud truck outside with the bass, I would have wanted more of that. I would have welcomed it. Give me more bass. But now we're in times now where loud is encouraged. If it's not loud, something is wrong. If you think about parties, concerts, or sporting events, those are the three loudest activities that I can think of. If it's a party, if it's quiet, what's someone going to say? It's boring. It's too quiet in here. Let's go find something else. Because if you're an extrovert, that's where you get your energy from. Okay, if it's a concert, concerts are if a concert is not loud. And what happened to me once, I'm using another personal example. I went to a concert and I was watching the artist, and the crowd wasn't really into it. I guess the crowd wasn't up to par for the artist's personal taste, I guess. His perception. So after about 2 or 3 songs, he tried to encourage the crowd. He said, he was saying, "Come on, y'all, where y'all at? Where you at? Come on now, I'm here for you all. Now, come on, where you at?" But it was quiet. Don't know why, but it was. So after a couple of songs, he cut the show. That was it. He walked off the stage. He was done because it wasn't loud enough. Loud is encouraged. And I've even seen an artist or performer chastise an audience for being too quiet or threaten to walk off the stage if they didn't give them more energy. Now let's think about a sporting event. Any football game or basketball game, all of them have mascots. And what happens is you'll have a mascot that runs around encouraging everyone to get loud. If it's a basketball game, I've gone to some NBA basketball games. They have, I don't think they show this on TV, but if you're there, they have a mascot, the team mascot with a home team mascot that runs around from side to side of the stadium, and they have like a cannon that they shoot t-shirts but they don't do it until the crowd is loud. They bait the crowd to get louder, and the louder section, that's where they go to shoot the t-shirts out so people can fight for them and grab the t-shirts. And they throw out different things, t-shirts, balls, and different things. But loud is encouraged. The louder you are, the more it's appreciated. Think about that. How loudness is encouraged, and quiet has become the problem now. If you're loud, it's great. If you're quiet, something is wrong. Even in social environments, if an introvert like myself, if I go to a party or some place, any social event, if I'm quiet, and someone who's an extrovert is used to being louder, they will say, "Why are you so quiet? Come on, you're here to party, let's get loud," or something like that. Loud is encouraged. If you're not loud, something is wrong. If it's too quiet, there's a problem. Loud is encouraged. Now, I think that's something that really should be addressed in some way. Because if you train someone, especially if it's a child, if you train them on being loud and to accept loud, that's what they're going to go for. And then what happens is, when it starts affecting them in some way, it may take them a while to figure out what's causing this. So that's where our personality comes in, with me being an introvert, and the difference between the extroverts who thrive off of the noisy environments. Because being overstimulated disrupts me. It disrupts any concentration that I could have, and I can't even think. There was a study that I saw, and it found that introverts who work in open office plan, they had more annoyance and irritation from noise disturbances than extroverts. I want to talk about something else that's really important. So, someone who has an underlying health condition, those conditions can also reduce our tolerance for noise. For example, if you have hearing loss, you can perceive loud volumes a certain way. Like people that have tinnitus, and tinnitus is a constant ringing in the ear. If you have tinnitus, that can make you sensitive to pitch and loudness, the amplification. And people who may have migraines, who suffer from migraines, they may find out that certain noises trigger their headache pain. So speaking of tinnitus, that's something that is constant, that I've found has been a common link with people who have been in the military, and people that either suffer from tinnitus or PTSD. And PTSD is really serious. I don't want to speak light on that. I could have a whole week of episodes dedicated to PTSD, because that's something that's really serious. Because think about it. Think back to what I mentioned earlier in this episode. PTSD and how sudden noises affect us. So PTSD, how that's linked to being triggered with certain noises, because that's where it starts. Military life can be loud. There's a lot of careers that are loud. That PTSD is something, I don't want to get into PTSD now, but I do want to mention that the sudden noises, the sudden loud noises can trigger certain things that with people that have health conditions, that can also reduce their tolerance to noise and how they perceive noise. I know that's a lot that I've thrown at you guys this week on this episode, because It's important. It is a lot. And it's a lot to think about. You think about how our age and our personalities affect how we perceive sounds that we hear and how we tolerate sounds. As we're younger, certain sounds don't affect us. As we're older, certain sounds do affect us and they do irritate us. Because remember, I would have welcomed that bass from the truck when I was younger. I would have wanted more of it. Let me feel the bass. Now I don't want it. Now I'm the jazz music person. At one point in time, I was the heavy metal person. Not so much heavy metal, but I was in that realm of accepting the noise. Before I kind of sort of wind this down, I want to just mention the quick ABC, just the basic of noise perception, how we hear noise, how we perceive it. Just remember that thunderstorm that someone can sleep through, that grandpa might be able to sleep through, doesn't sleep through it as much anymore. We've talked about why noise bothers us and how it can affect our mental health and the perception of it, noise, and how it affects us. That's just a lot to think about. That is a lot. Because we never think about it fully in that way, in that perspective. I didn't until now, because if you think about the psychological side of noise, how it messes with our heads. Now I'm talking about stress. So like if you're stuck in traffic or you have to deal with a noisy neighbor all the time, it's just not fun. And if you think about if you ever think about how noise can actually crank up the stress levels, it's like something that constantly dripping that's just wearing you down. Like if you ever find yourself snapping at someone for no reason at all, after you've had a loud day, or if you've been sitting in traffic and traffic is loud, because traffic is loud. That's that noise effect. And what does it do? It messes with our patience. And before you know it, we're not our normal cool selves anymore. That's the stress that it causes, but it's not just about the stress, it's the noise. If you're trying to sleep, if you find yourself trying to sleep, while you're sleeping or trying to sleep, our brain is still working. It's still working overtime, still trying to drown out the racket that's around us. So it's no wonder why some of us wake up feeling like we've just been through a 10-round boxing fight with Mike Tyson or something. Back to me being a jazz person, not saying that I'm a jazz person, but listening to jazz, my focus is going to be better if I'm listening to jazz than listening to heavy metal. It's going to be harder for me to get things done if I'm listening to something loud, or if I'm in a loud environment where I'm irritated or annoyed. The big question is, how do we deal with this up and down roller coaster that we get from the noise in the way how we perceive it? Because there's no one size fits all answer. We're all different. What it boils down to, I think, is different strokes for different folks. Some of us can handle it better. Some of us can't. It's not that it's wrong either way. It's just those factors play a big role in the way we handle noise, in the way that we perceive noise. Our age, our personality plays a role in all of this. There you have it. The ins and outs of noise perception and the way we tolerate it. Hope that you were able to learn something about the impact of sound on our well-being from this episode. And as we wrap up today's episode, I hope that you were also able to take away just some type of newfound appreciation for the role that noise plays in our lives, in your life, and its impact on mental health, and the impact that it can have on mental health in a negative or positive way. Thanks for tuning in to the Cedric Black podcast. I'm Cedric Black, signing off with the hope that your world becomes a quieter and more serene place. Until next time, take care.